I'm gonna multi-track this one. So the last one was done just me playing and singing at the same time, but I'm gonna do these things separately.
Okay.
Because it lets me cheat. Wow, it's always been Scottish and folk music centric. I started playing pipes and started as a drummer as well when I was about 5 or 6. My dad's a drummer, plays pipes as well. My grandfather was a piper, and so it was kind of in the family. And that was my first exposure to music was piping and Scottish music. So I started that as a young kid, and it wasn't until about grade 8 that I picked up guitar. It was more rock and heavy metal influenced by that time, and ended up being good enough at guitar that I went to school for it. So I went to school for the jazz program, but I mean, piping's always been there. It's always been something that I've done. It's kind of my main focus right now is playing pipes and Celtic music, and having the background in guitar through the jazz program and through the metal program. You know, playing Celtic stuff on guitar has always been something that I enjoy doing, taking pipe tunes and arranging them for guitar, and you know, having that musical background lets me accompany pipe tunes on guitar as well with chords, and having an understanding of the harmonic structures that go into that traditional Celtic music.
So it sounds
Yeah, Robbie Burns has always been there. Just growing up in a Scottish household, and you know, Burns night events and different things through the pipe band, and Burns music is you know, several of his songs have become staples of the pipe music repertoire. Things like A Man's a Man, Neil Gow's Farewell to Whiskey, and you know, a few other Burns. I mean, Auld Lang Syne as well has been adapted for the bagpipes, and especially Burns Dinner's pipes are always part of it. And knowing those tunes is kind of a requirement for every piper. If you have to pipe in a haggis, you need to know A Man's a Man and all that. And so that exposure to Burns has been largely through piping, and then a little bit through song as well. But I've never really, before this project, attempted to sit down and record any of Burns' songs. I like My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose is a good one as well. And then, of course, the tunes on pipes are always favorites. Yeah. You know, for the one that goes to A Man's a Man, it was fairly straightforward. I mean, that
The Lover Cured, yeah.
Yeah, that tune I know fairly well, and it was a matter of sort of sitting down and figuring out, you know, what are the chords that go along with it, and deciding how I wanted to play it, and then finding out what key worked best for my vocal range, which isn't a big vocal range, but that was probably the easiest one, is sitting down and doing The Lover Cured, because I am so familiar with the tune, and so it was just a matter of inserting the words into the tune and playing the chords over top of it. I think, you know, in my approach to that tune, very much I was influenced by previous recordings and previous settings of A Man's a Man. I mean, obviously, you get that kind of folk sound with an acoustic guitar, and just sort of almost a ballad type of approach to it, just guitar and vocals. Something very simple, and it'll give that style. I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to take something like that and put it into a different genre of music, other than folk music. But my experience with folk music and with piping sort of, you know, it was just kind of, and I had a preconceived understanding of the elements that were required to produce sort of a folk-sounding production of that tune, which to me turned out to be essentially like the Robert Burns version, but with different words, with the Robert Burns from Hamilton sort of inserting the different words. I think he was capitalizing on it, and to me it wasn't too strange to see different words set to the same music. And I mean, Robert Burns, the real Robert Burns himself, did a lot of that, where he would take traditional folk songs and write the words for it. Because, and I don't know enough about it, but I don't think he composed a lot of the melodies. It was sort of collecting these traditional melodies and then putting words to it. I mean, obviously he was so good at it that then these tunes become synonymous with him.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, he's very experienced.
I don't think I'm purposely conscious of it, and I don't think that I'm particularly good at it either. But definitely just the experience with the folk music idiom, and with listening to enough of it, and listening to the ways in which the Scottish dialect and the Scottish accent translates into song, because very often, you know, you hear someone sing and they may lose their accent when they sing. But I think there's particular pronunciations and particular ways of treating vowel sounds that give that sort of Scottishness to the performance, and I think it's just a matter of exposure to that kind of music and listening to it enough. Words, if it's sung in, say, a Canadian accent, it almost loses some of the air of authenticity. And of course you'll have traditionalists and people who think that they're purists saying, well, that's not the way the song goes, it should be pronounced like this. And
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, what the real answer to that kind of thing is, because I don't think it makes it any less of an authentic performance. It's just you know, it's the modern way of folk music, and people sort of taking these folk tunes and you know, putting their own experiences behind them. But I think the inclusion then of well-known songs in the chapbook is very important to note, because they had to have music that people knew.
I had to have a context.
Yeah, and so presenting these songs and saying, you know, here's this lyrical content that has whatever meaning we're trying to impart, but it has this melody along with it, and of course people know that melody, and then they can, you know, sing the song to that melody. And you know, this would have been happening maybe not before the invention of print music, but definitely before it was really commonplace, and so it would have been much more expensive to produce the chapbooks with the printed melodies in them.
Yeah.
And so picking melodies that people already knew was imperative, I think. I mean, really, in the chapbook it says, you know, here's Anna to the tune of Cowden Knows. And you know, today we have the advantage that I can type Cowden Knows into Google and into YouTube and find musical examples. And I mean, looking at that, listening to the Broom of Cowden Knows, which has different words, but essentially the same phrasing and melody, and you listen to that melody line, and then I would go back to Anna and sort of read through the verse and kind of sing through the verse in my head and make sure that the syllables lined up and that it worked. And it seems to fit. So I would say that, you know, it's, you know, the Broom of Cowden Knows, and in the chapbook it says Cowden Knows, and the melody fits the syntax of the words presented. So I think it's pretty interesting, and it was something that certainly I'd never heard of before this project. And I don't think it's not going to make a big change. It's not like this guy's going to be so much more famous and there's going to be all these different productions of his tunes, but it's you know, it's an interesting piece of history, and of sort of thinking, you know, what was the real sort of motivation for this Robert Burns of Hamilton? Was he trying to capitalize on the other Robert Burns and, you know, make money on his reputation, on the real Robert Burns reputation? And it's just sort of fascinating and kind of cool to be you know, recording these other versions of the songs.
Yeah.